Alright, as we continue with Freud, we've seen what his map of the human mind looks like, and now we're going to see how religion comes into play. So this is not the first time we've looked at a critique of religion. We've looked at Marx, we've looked at Darwin this semester. Marx is the one who says religious suffering is the sigh of the oppressed creature. The heart of a heartless world, it is the opium of the people, right? It's like a drug that we use just because life is so crappy. Freud's critique of religion fits into the broad framework that we've already looked at, but he gives this explanation for religious belief that naturally reflects his psychoanalytic tendencies. So the first thing he does in Future of an Illusion is list 3 claims upon which he believes that religion has been founded. So here they are. The first one is that religious teachings deserve to be believed because they were believed by our primal ancestors. So these are reasons that we have been religious in the past, that we have accepted religious belief. And one of those reasons is like, hey, people have always been religious, right? Our primal ancestors had religion. And so that's why those religious teachings deserve to be believed. Second is the understanding that we have these proofs. Proofs that have been handed down from those same ancestors. So if you've taken Western Civ 1, you can think about the proofs for God's existence by Thomas Aquinas. Evidence of the scripture, right, is supposed to be a proof in and of itself. Artifacts, saints' bones, the Shroud of Turin, stuff like that. These things are supposed to function as proof of religious belief. And then finally, it's been traditionally forbidden to question the authenticity of religious beliefs. And this is something that Freud is really going to get into. But these are all the reasons that in the past people have accepted religious beliefs. What Freud is trying to do in this text is show how religious belief reflects what he calls a collective neurosis. It's like a sickness that everybody in society suffers from. And this is something that we have to work through over time, all of us, like humanity itself. So it's like we're in global therapy right now for this sickness that we all suffer from, which is religion. So before he deals with this, he wants to give us this rational critique of the arguments that are often given in favor of religious beliefs. So I'll walk you through 2 of those. The first one that he critiques is what he calls the credo quia absurdum. And that's just Latin for, I believe it because it is absurd. And we've looked at this a lot, I think, in Western Civ 1. This is the idea that religious doctrines, religious beliefs, are not subject to human reason. They are above and beyond reason. Even Descartes says this, right? Like the proof of God is, it's not something that we can sort of really rationally walk ourselves through, even though he tries. But religious beliefs have to be felt within. And even when we do feel them within, we don't have to comprehend them. So, think of like faith, right? It's like, oh, I know that this is true. I don't have any proof for it. And I know that it sounds really crazy that when you eat that cracker and you drink that wine that, when the priest blesses it, it literally turns into the body and the blood of Christ. I know that sounds crazy, but I have faith. And so Freud says, well, look at these beliefs. Like, just because, they are absurd, it doesn't mean that I'm obliged to believe every absurdity in the world. Why do I have to believe this one? The other thing so this is kind of a 2-pronged critique. One is that we don't have to believe absurdities, and second is, the idea of a conversion experience, right? Or a religious experience that somebody feels inwardly. So remember the story of St. Paul, right? When he's still Saul of Tarsus and he's going around and he's persecuting Christians and he's rounding them up and bringing them back to the Roman Empire, and he's on his horse and he's riding somewhere and he gets struck by lightning. And so he falls off his horse and he's blinded. And in that moment, he swears that the voice of God appears to him and tells him to stop doing what he's doing and become a man of the Lord. So, great. St. Paul has this conversion experience, right? What does that have to do with me? Let's say that I'm on a horse, like, sort of behind St. Paul, and all I see is him falling off a horse and getting struck by lightning. And I'm like, whoa, crazy. I can't believe that happened to you. And he's like, I just saw God. And I'm like, okay. Are you feeling okay? So, again, like conversion conversion experiences and religious experiences are things that a person feels within themselves, but they can't, like, project those experiences outward. They can tell us what happened, but unless I experience what St. Paul experiences, I don't have that kind of unique vision that he has. So basically Freud is asking, like, okay, great, you had a conversion experience, or you had a religious experience. Great, what does that mean to me? Now, the second critique he makes of religious belief is what he calls the critique of the philosophy of as if. And so this actually really resembles closely something that we call Pascal's wager that I'm going to show you in a chart. So, if you've ever heard of Pascal's wager, it's kind of funny, but if you haven't, here's what it is. So, anytime you look at a decision table like this, what you're looking at on the side here is what actions we can take. And at the top, we're looking at states of the universe. So, let's look at the states of the universe first. There are two possible states of the universe, right? God exists, yes, or he doesn't exist, no. So there's nothing in between. There are just two possibilities here. And let's imagine that there are two possible ways that we could behave. We could behave righteously, or we could behave sinfully, right? So when you plug things into a decision table like this, what you're looking at is, if we behave righteously and the state of the world is one of these two things, what's going to happen to us? So the way you read this is, let's look at righteous conduct and no existence. So let's say that you behave righteously and it turns out that God doesn't exist. Did you lose anything? Not really, Pascal says. You might have lost out on some fun. You probably didn't go to all the raging parties and keggers, and maybe you didn't smoke all the weed you wanted to, but if it turns out that you had a righteous life and God doesn't exist, you didn't really miss much, right? But if you live a righteous life and it turns out that God doesn't exist, right? What do you get? You get salvation forever, for eternity. So this looks pretty awesome, right? Now let's imagine if you behave sinfully. If you behave sinfully and it turns out that God doesn't exist, Pascal says, well, you had some fun in the short term, right? Because life is short, so you had some fun. But if you behave sinfully and it turns out that God does exist, what do you get? You get eternal damnation. Okay, so when we look at a decision table like this, what we're trying to do is, what we're trying to figure out is what we should do. Should we behave righteously or should we behave sinfully? Based on these two possible states of the world, which action should we take? Pascal says, well, I mean, you look at the reward for righteousness and you look at the possible punishment for sinfulness, and everybody would choose to be righteous, right? We should choose to be righteous. So we basically function like we're placing a bet. We bet that God exists even though we can't prove it, because if it turns out that we're right, heaven is way better than hell, right? So back to this idea, Freud says, our thought activity includes a lot of these hypotheses whose groundlessness and absurdity we realize. We call them fictions, but we have these really practical reasons to believe, to behave as if we actually believed in these fictions, right? So Pascal's wager, again, is the idea like, hey, I can't prove that God exists, but holy crap, let's assume that he does. So Freud says, these are two arguments that people have traditionally trotted out in favor of religious belief that are frankly kind of crappy. They're not very good arguments. So I'm actually going to stop this one here, and then I'll continue on to talk about sort of the connection between religion, the mind, and civilization.